Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to a new type of video that I'm going to do. It's not really new, I just kind of wanted to do some coloring because I made a promise to myself and I have to keep it. So, that's what you're really going to be seeing here. And just to preface, I actually am going to have a very much long form discussion on my thoughts on a particular book I finished reading recently. It was called Think and Grow Rich, and I wanted to talk about a particular section that I read towards the end of the book. So that's more or less what's going to be happening throughout this video. So you'll see a past version of me as well as this past version of me, just to knock that out the way. And before we get really started, I would like for you all to like the video, subscribe as well, and comment below on your thoughts on the video. Just tell me what you think about the little discussion that I have here. That's all it. So until then, I will check you all later. Alright, so I really do hope this works, but yeah, I was just kind of having a conversation with my cats because I've kind of lost my mind. And I ended up thinking about what I learned yesterday from finishing the first time Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it honestly was a very, very, very great book. I finished up the last, it had to have been 2 hours and 47 minutes, just sitting in the field and doing some watercolor painting. And I began to think a bit more about what was said. And right now, even as I lay in my backyard under the sun and everything, I wanted to record this conversation. So here you go, basically. So while I was thinking about the things that transpired in the book, I began to linger about the what Napoleon Hill later on calls it, the 6 ghosts of fear, which are, and it's a little odd to say them in particular, but the way that he describes them, I actually thought about it a little bit more, and I actually categorized them on a little scale, not really a scale, a little spectrum for how they actually should be seen. So for the 6 ghosts of fear, there are 2 types that you need to think of these as. For these 6 ghosts, you have on one side the side number 1, and then you have the side number 6 going all the way to the last fear. On side number 1, you have the, how did I say it? I literally just said it too. You have the visibility of the fear. Basically, how visible is the fear? And number 1 is the most visible, while number 6 is the least visible. So if you all can see how I'm doing this little spectrum, yeah, that's what it is, spectrum. And then on top of that, you have a second way to categorize these, and it is definiteness, which Napoleon Hill also talks about as well in the book. He has a whole chapter about it, where number 1 is the least definite, while number 6 is the most definite, and number 6 will happen straight up completely. Like, there's no avoiding it, even though some people will try. That's how that goes. So the first of the 6 ghosts is the fear of poverty, and that's honestly not too difficult to explain, but being poor or not having the accrued wealth that one may think that they need to have in order to live a quote-unquote successful life. And then going into that, you have the fear of, you have number 2, which is the fear of criticism. And criticism can come in so many different ways. Most of the time and Napoleon Hill actually goes deeper into this a little later in the book, towards the end actually, where he says that the biggest criticism that you have is the voice in your head. And as an artist, I really had to play that back a couple of times when I was listening to the audiobook. That voice in your head is one of the biggest enemies, and sometimes, and I do mean sometimes, it can be the biggest ally in this world. But you have to be really careful in how you do it. And again, these two, this is number 1 and number 2, which is poverty and criticism. Poverty is the least definite of these 6 fears, but it's the most visible. You can see when somebody is poor to an extent. Obviously, somebody who may be poor may dress like they're rich and things of that nature, but you can literally see this fear right in front of you. And then criticism, you can see it as well. Most of the time you'll actually read it. You'll read or hear it. So I should say, instead of saying visibility, I should say sensible, but So the third ghost is the fear of ill health, which can be so many things, but mainly disease. And right now, as you all can see, I don't know what your beliefs are, but this virus has gotten a lot of people afraid to get sick or afraid to do certain things under the guise of getting sick or having ill health, which is very odd and very frightening, honestly. But you all can see it, and some of you all may be experiencing it as well. So that's how that fear goes. And I'm going to double back on all of these once I go through the list. But the fourth ghost is going to be the fear of the loss of love, which is easier to explain, but it's the lengthiest fear on this list. And basically that just means you have a basic fear of losing someone you love. That someone you love could be your husband, your wife, your spouse of any kind, your partner in crime, your kid brother, your cousin, your sister, anybody, your parents especially, anybody you love, and you have a fear of them being lost. And that loss doesn't necessarily have to be they leave this world, they die. That loss could mean a loss of a healthy, sustainable relationship with them. That right there is actually a bit more painful than just having them die, because of how we humans work socially. Sometimes we need those people in our life. So if we do something that we deem undesirable, we could just up and leave that person, or they could leave us, I should say. Going into the next one, the fifth basic fear is ghost of fear is going to be the fear of old age, which honestly is the craziest one on this list. But again, I'll double back on it. Basically, old age, you're getting older, you're aging out, you're growing wiser, actually, which is one of the counter arguments to this fear. But yeah, basically it's just the fear of old age. Is you growing older. It's you not being 20 years old anymore. It's you being 75 now, and you've been alive for 3/4 of a century. Yeah, my math's good. There you go. So yeah, that's how that one works. And finally, the sixth basic fear is going to be the fear of death, which, as you if you thought about the two spectrums I told you to compare these with, death is the least visible, yet the most definite. Some people actually can see their death, not necessarily in a premonition type of sense, but some people can literally see the cause of their death. If they're in a car accident, they can see the car hitting them tragically, or if they fall off a mountain, they can literally see the ground coming towards them, the thing that breaks their fall and takes their life, and things of that nature. But death is the most definite, while being poor is the least definite. Again, that's that second layer of the spectrum that I mentioned earlier at the start of this little recording I'm doing. And honestly, once I started thinking about all of this, it made a lot of sense. So then I kept reading on and thinking real rich, and I began to think a lot more about how it affects people. And then the funniest thing is that as soon as I thought about certain pieces of it, it was actually mentioned in the book, and that made me laugh a lot. But Napoleon Hill later on, and by later on I mean like 10 pages later, talks about the solutions to conquering these fears. Because if you decide to let these fears rule you, then you have been conquered by yourself instead of conquering yourself, which basically means you have to take control of you, or you will take control of you. If you're not, that's a very powerful but very confusing way to say how you should rule over yourself. But yeah, once I heard it, it made perfect sense to me. So just doubling back, to conquer the fear of death, you have to honestly understand that that is the most definite thing that could ever happen to anything in the universe, not just you. Because I should say because everything has an end, including human life. Everything has an end, or a death. Most people need to understand that it could come anywhere, and it could come anytime. It can come within the next couple of minutes. It can come within 1,000 years, because that's how the Bible does it, and that's pretty fun to learn about. So once you understand that death is definite, but also understand the fact that you are nothing but recycled energy from stars and things of that nature, you should honestly have a better outlook on life, and you should never fear death or fear doing something because you think that it will lead to the loss of your life. Going back to old age, it's kind of the exact same thing. And you'll actually notice that all of the first 5 of these fears basically lead to death. And I say lead to death, but they also stem from the fear of death. Because we fear dying, or because some humans fear dying, they don't want to become old. Because people fear dying, they don't want to have ill health, or they don't want to be afflicted with any type of disease. But again, once you conquer these particular types of fears, it becomes self-evident that you don't have to fear anything at all. And I like that. And that part right there is what struck me to actually start recording this, because I have a lot of conversations like this, and I needed to record some of these just for other people to hear. But going to the loss of love. Loss of love is honestly the one that makes a lot more sense in its connection to death, especially if you have, if you've been married to your spouse for however long, and this has scientifically been proven too. Well, let me not say that. I'm not 1,000% sure. I'm like 800 anyway. Where if the wife were to pass away, the husband is only a few years behind her, simply because of how connected two people can get in a relationship. So this is why when someone loses someone like that, it can hurt them in so many different ways other than just emotionally, which would cause them to cry or become depressed or something like that. It could also hurt them physically, because depending on how long you're married or together with this person, it doesn't have to be your spouse, it could be your parents or even your sister, that can physically feel like a part of you has been taken. So it can affect you physically. And then without going too deep into it, it can also affect you spiritually as well. And then it can definitely affect you financially too, because that's a long story also. But
just let's move on a little bit more. On to number 3. Yes, number 3. Ill health. Like I actually kind of explained this one a little bit more than I should have, but ill health was basically just being scared to get sick, or scared to do something because of because of the probability of getting sick. You don't want to go out to the store right now because you don't want to become sick. You don't want to go into the forest because you don't want to get sick, and things of that nature. And Napoleon Hill actually explains this one a lot clearer. You can also fake being sick to an extent, which is called hypochondria, where you basically just fake having an illness and things of that nature. And because of the placebo effect, as well as the power of the human mind, which is what the entire book is about, the mental sickness that you say you have can be 1,000 times worse, more deadly, and more potent than the actual sickness that you may or may not have. And he made a point, and he stressed about this point in particular as well, because of how much people actually suffer from this. People suffer from hypochondria and they don't even know it, just by saying that they feel sick, or they feel tired, or they feel like they have insert disease or illness here, and then a few weeks later, or even the next day, they have the symptoms. They have the standard symptoms of this disease. And that right there can be extremely scary because of, again, how powerful the mind is. Because Napoleon Hill actually touched on the subconscious nature of it too as well, because of how if the subconscious perceives something as such, or perceives it as being there, being real, the subconscious mind will manifest whatever you want into reality. And it's not like the mind will just like a genie in a bottle, pop it, poof it into thin air. The subconscious mind will move certain things into position so they can be lined up perfectly. I made a pool reference for no reason, and I don't know why I did that. Anyway, so that's why ill health is so dangerous, because if you think that you can get sick, you will get sick. And if you think, therefore you are there. And that's why the book is called Think and Grow Rich. But I think I went a little too long on that one, but that's kind of exactly how Napoleon Hill did it in the book. So let's go on down to number 2. Number 2 is the fear of criticism. And again, I touched on the voice in your head that you have about criticism, which again, that's one of the more potent ones. But the fear of criticism can also quite literally be the fear of people talking about you, the fear of critique. And this is actually where that voice develops from, most likely, because we have to safeguard ourselves from the critique of others, so we critique ourselves. And recently, Jazza actually did a video about this as well, and I really, really appreciated it. And I think I kind of stole his idea, like right now. Anyway, so one of the bigger criticisms that you can get from people is very much passive aggressive. It's those comparisons that people have on you towards other people. Oh, you do this just like the other person does, or you draw this like that other person does. Or not even talking about from an artist's perspective, you can say, oh, you run just as fast as this person, or you look like this person, things of that nature. Just small critiques that some of them can be harmless. Saying that you look like someone else could be very harmless, or depending on your mindset, it can be world destroying. It can be absolutely obliteratory. Wait, I don't think that's a word. But it all depends on your perspective and your mindset. So the fear of criticism can be extremely dangerous and deadly at times, because there have been people, famous and otherwise, or could have been famous, that quite literally took their own lives or destroyed their own selves because of criticism. And Napoleon Hill actually gives the example of Broadway, where it's the let's see, he called it the doorstop. He called it the doorstop of dreams, and the no, he didn't. Basically, he said that Broadway was a place for dreams to die and for dreams to be born, and that honestly goes right into criticism, because of how those actors, actresses, artists, musicians, and everything of that nature would be perceived at Broadway by the critics. That could determine their career for the rest of their lives and for the rest of their families' lives. So criticism is really dangerous, but it can also be helpful if it is constructive enough. But yeah. So on to number 1, which is the fear of poverty. And the book, since it is titled Think and Grow Rich, it is going to be more of a book about how to get rich, but the main purpose of the book is to change your mindset on how to get rich. Because if you have the fear of being poor or the fear of poverty, you won't ever grow to be rich properly, not in the way that you really want yourself to. You may have a certain sense of being rich, but because you have a fear of poverty, you won't ever fully achieve that, fully actualize it. And then Napoleon actually brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well, where self-actualization is at the very top, and then at the very bottom is the survival of the self. Meaning that at the very bottom of this pyramid, you have to feed yourself, clothe yourself, make sure you're hydrated, and make sure you have a stable home and things of that nature. And then you go all the way up, where you have security, you have social constructs / social connections, I should say, with your friends. And then at the very top of that pyramid, you have your sense of self, your self-actualization. You understand who you are, what your purpose is in life. And because of these 6 basic fears, even if you have one of them, you may or may not be able to fully actualize yourself, because one of these fears is going to be holding you down. For me, it's always been the fear of criticism, just to be honest with you. And that's just something that I can say in my head out loud, actually, that it's been tough, but that's kind of why I am where I am. I'm just trying to push past that fear as well as all of these others. But for poverty, if you don't master poverty in the proper way, poverty will take control of you, because of how being rich actually shows itself in the mind. And Napoleon actually gives an example of this, where he says that the subconscious mind has to be taught to have riches, or riches have to be groomed and gardened and not soiled, but fed the proper nutrients in order to grow something very much similar to a plant. You actually have to put in the work to become rich or become wealthy and to not be poor, period. But if you allow yourself to just go and not even try to safeguard your mind, and this is the main thing, again, it's all about mindset. If you don't try to safeguard your mind, you won't really be able to grow rich, and you will always have you always will be poor. So if you accept poverty as your basic fear, you will remain in that basic fear. You will remain poor. And this is why poverty is the most visible one, because of how if you accept it, that will be the only thing that you see. But if you accept being rich, more or less. And rich, just to specify, rich doesn't necessarily mean you have a lot of currency. You have a lot of dollars, you have a lot of pesos and things of that nature. Rich doesn't mean that. Rich could mean rich in spirit. Rich could also mean you're rich in a title, you're rich in family, things of that nature. Being rich does not have to do with monetary wealth, even though a lot of people will associate it with that. And the whole basis of the book is to be rich in a monetary sense. But you can't just be rich in a monetary sense. You have to start off with a rich mindset, and you have to start off with a rich spirit. Because you can't teach a poor person to be rich, because they'll have those poor mentalities. Or at least that's how the book teaches it. Okay, so that was a lot longer than I thought it was, and I have no idea how long it is. I'm laying asleep. I'm laying down. But that's the conversation I wanted to have. And that's kind of it. Well, it is only 6 points, so I wasn't too sure what else I would say, but that's kind of it. So, yeah.